if you're a young designer out there and you're looking to start billing freelance, look at all your expenses. Make sure you're covering your expenses, right? You've got a license there that you've got to cover. Make sure you're covering that.
And it's also kind of be picky. If you have a chance, pick projects you love, because that way you'll build up a portfolio of projects you love and you'll get more clients you like. Or if you start doing projects you don't want to do, you're just going to get more projects you don't want to do.
If you're looking ahead, what are you seeing in terms of trends for packaging? And what are maybe some misses that a lot of brands aren't looking at when it comes to packaging? Cool, man. So just want to kind of get into a little bit about who you are, what you do, stuff that you've done, and this new role at Enlisted, which is pretty cool. The goal here is for anybody listening that's either wanting to get into packaging, kind of the different paths and the path that you took, and then also anybody that's already in packaging that may not be familiar with the stuff that you're doing. As a designer, all I do are concept sketches. I don't do any 3D. I don't do any layouts anymore. I just focus on concept development and then working with a team like yourself and designers to then bring it all together. A lot of people don't really realize how big packaging is, and everything that you can do with it.
Yeah, pretty much everything you touched was once in a package.
Yeah, for sure, man. So if you're ready, we'll just kick this thing off, man.
Go ahead.
All right, man. So today I've got Matt Hanzly, who's now with Enlisted. We've emailed for a couple of years now, but we've never really met. I think when I first met you, you were with, was it?
Peloton, I think it was, wasn't it?
No, I think it was the vaping company. What was that?
Oh, Juul.
Juul, that's what it is.
Yeah.
If you can just give us like a quick, 1 minute breakdown of what you do in the packaging industry.
For the last couple of years, I've been doing mostly consumer electronics packaging, but I do like outside consumer electronics, touch food once in a while, and vape industry, you touch a little bit of everything, but a lot of it's been consumer electronics, and it's been like developing unboxing experiences for people where I do almost all consumer facing packaging. I don't necessarily do as much about like the to manufacturer or the shipping start part of it. It's just all the consumer facing, what the customer touches, how they're going to open up the box, how they're going to see it on the shelf.
Oh, and when you're saying, okay, that you focus on the unboxing process, like what's that approach and what does that mean?
So it's just like, I try to think about, depending on like what the product is, like if it's a lower price product and there's not much of an unboxing process, it's like more like on shelf, like how am I going to draw their attention in? But then like the more expensive items, like you have a camera, you have tablets, you have phones, like a customer to feel comfortable with the package. I don't want them to like second guess their purchase. It's kind of like the package is the first thing the customer is going to touch when they buy a product. So it's like the first impression they have of that product, where if the packaging experience is going to be bad, it's just like one more extra step the product has to make to overcome a bad package. I'm just trying to like take away that buyer's remorse possibility by having a unboxing experience that helps the customer. It's like, and also you want to make your unboxing experience like logical, so people like understand the product through the package.
Okay, so when you're saying that you need to make the unboxing process logical, right? Can you give me an example?
All right, let's take a quick second to talk about idpdirect.com. Go right to that website, download the design guides, the sustainability guides, the recyclable icon guide, which basically lists out all the different icons. It gives them to you in vectors. You can drop them right into your artwork right now, today, and go right into production. All right, back to the pod.
Yeah, so like a lot of stuff, like you'll have a cord, like a lot of consumer electronics, you'll have a cord or a charging station will come with it, and then you'll have documents. It's like a matter of figuring out where you put those documents, and then where you put the cord, and then the product to figure out like, and like, do you put the cord next to where the cord would attach to the product? You put it underneath it, just trying to figure out like the logical steps. So you make sure the person grabs the part that they need next in order to set the product. Like build steps into the package that correspond to the steps of setting up the product.
All right. So then how do you start, right? Like if I'm tech company number 3 and I've got a product that I need packaged out, just whatever product, right? I mean, they all pretty much have all the same typical components. I send you the product. And then what's your first step? Like before you even begin designing, what do you first do?
If it's depending on what it is, but like if it's something I haven't done a lot, I'll usually go to the store just to see like what's everybody else doing, like where is this package going to live, so they understand the environment that it's going to be shipped, store or sold in. So then from there, I'll try to understand the product, like what is this brand, what are they trying to say with their brand, like what are they trying to build, like are they an adventure brand, or are they like a home brand, like. So that way you can kind of build like whole different aspects of the brand into the packaging, where you try to think about like materials that you're going to use and finishes, like how can that relate back to that brand. And then from there, I'll usually start sketching. I try to do a lot of like hand sketching just at the start, just tons of concepts out, and then I'll narrow it down to like a more refined sketch. And that's what I'll present to the client. And then from there, try and narrow it down to like, you say 1 or 2, and then you start building CAD and you start building actual prototypes.
So in the concept development stage, you're doing hand sketches. Like you said, you do a ton of different directions. Are you thinking materials at that point?
Yeah. I'm always kind of thinking materials and finishes. So I think
Mhm.
that's like real important. And a lot of brands, like especially now, everyone's trying to go sustainable. So you're trying to find out what sustainable material works for them. Like, is the product super heavy? What sort of materials will actually get that product there safe? Or is the product pretty light and you can kind of use almost anything? It's like, and also what's their budget and what's their timeline? Where like some like molded fibers or trays that have a little longer timelines for building tools, where like a corrugated box is usually a little bit quicker to just build the die lines. So it's just a matter of their timeline, their budget, trying to figure out what works best for them.
Yeah, cool. And then from there, you said you'll go to CAD. Are you doing also the visual design on the pack?
What do you mean by visual design? Like the graphic design?
Yeah.
A lot of times, like for Juul and a lot of times Veritip, we do like, I kind of just call them like rough graphics, kind of like placeholders. Because I always
Mhm.
find like if you present a white box to like a marketing team, to an executive team, it's like very hard to impress them. And it's very hard to like visualize like, oh, this is our brand. This is what it's going to look like. So usually I'll put on like some rough graphics just to hold it over. And then I'll pass it off to the graphics team because they'll usually have, I don't have all the copy. I don't have all the photography, all that sort of stuff set up. So they'll pass the die lines off to them. They add their graphics and then they'll pass it back to me and then I'll build a render off of their file.
Sure. Sure. And it's funny because I think a lot of times when people think of a packaging designer, I mean, a lot of people don't know everything that goes into packaging design. And, why would they? Right. I mean, if they're not a packaging designer, they don't know everything that's in there. I mean, I'm not a doctor. I don't know what goes into, everything in there and all the different channels that you can take. So with packaging, you're doing the concepting, you're doing the 3D CAD, and then you're putting together templates and die lines for that as well as materials and finishes.
Yep.
But you're not necessarily doing the graphic design and copy and everything else. So that then brings in a different team, like a graphic design team, internal branding team, or an outside agency. What are some of the other things that you do focus on, right? Like as a packaging designer, I guess, do you call yourself a packaging designer? What do you call yourself?
Packaging designer. I think that's kind of the term. It's always hard to explain when people ask like what you do. I was like, kind of packaging design. I went to school for packaging engineering, but I've kind of gone away from that industry because it just got like, I didn't enjoy the engineering part as much, or I just like the design being creative part. So yeah, I think packaging designer or packaging visualization, somewhere around there.
Yeah. And then, so you went to school for packaging engineering. Where did you go to school?
I went to RIT.
Okay. Awesome.
Yep, and I went to RISD also, like afterwards for like some graphic design classes. I went to Hasbro. Yeah, a little bit of both background.
That's awesome, man. So you went to RIT. I mean, that's a heavy engineering school. And so that's like materials, drop tests, like really knowing all the components of material. What are the things that you use from your education at RIT that you still use today?
A lot of it's good, like just know like the testing process. Like you understand like what this package needs to like probably survive transit testing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's always good. And like I'm not an expert at the manufacturing process, but I have a rough idea of how everything's going to be assembled and manufactured. So like when I'm building stuff, I can like figure out like what the process is going to be and kind of when I'm talking to manufacturing teams, I'm not completely unknown on what they're talking about. So it makes life a little bit easier on that side to have like both sides. I'm also like it's a good bridge between like the graphic design team and because most companies have like a package engineering team. So I'm kind of like that bridge in between graphic design and package engineering team.
Yeah. I mean, that's crazy because most people, at least from what I've seen a lot of designers try to work their way over to engineering. I know that was my path, or it was graphic design. And then it's like, I fell in love with the structural design side of it and just kind of ditched graphics and moved right into structure and experience design. But I don't see a lot of people starting on the engineering side, moving over to the more creative side, right? You'll feel like you're either one or the other. So what made you want to move away from engineering? Like, what was it that you didn't enjoy?
I think I did a couple of jobs where like you do everyday Excel sheets and like you're doing constant testing. I was like, this isn't for me. And then I did a co-op at Hasbro and I just kind of like changed everything for me where I was like, realized like, oh, I don't have to do Excel sheets every day. I can actually build die lines. I can create 3D structures. I can be creative. And I was like, oh, this is a completely different side of packaging. I kind of knew it was there, but I didn't realize I could get into. Yeah. So I kind of just stumbled into it through Hasbro and then I haven't really left since.
That's awesome, man. And I mean, how long have you been doing this? When did you graduate?
2006. Yeah, then it's been good. I've been jumping around too. I picked up rendering like the last 6 or 7 years. I've been trying to do like more and more of that. And that's really what I like doing a lot of work. I'll do a lot of rendering even outside of packaging just to like learn different techniques and different styles.
You're like this hot shot. Like you're like a superstar key shot renderer. No, I mean, like, I don't know. I talked to a bunch of people like, oh yeah, I was talking to a designer. I was talking to Stephen Graham. And he's like, hey man, I'm talking to Matt Hanzly. I'm like, oh yeah, I know him. It's like everybody that I talk to is familiar with you and the work that you do. And I mean, you're doing a ton of rendering. You've done a ton of rendering for KeyShot themselves. Yeah. And for anybody that's not familiar, can you explain maybe the tools that you're using?
Yeah, like if anyone doesn't know, like I didn't know about Keyshot really till the last, since I was at Veritas, I was like last 10 years or so. It's like a nice program. There's other programs that do very similar things that you can take like your die lines from ArduinoCAD and fold them up into 3D and then bring them into Keyshot. And you can apply your graphics to your packaging. So that way, like before we used to always like try to mock up samples in-house where a lot of times like if you're doing foil, if you're doing embossing, it's kind of hard to mimic that in-house without having to send to the vendor. For Keyshot, I'm able to get you like a photoreal image of your package fully printed that you can present to clients right off the start instead of having to wait weeks or months to get samples.
Yeah. And then so are you building in SolidWorks or, what are the other tools that you're using?
I use a lot. I started out in SolidWorks. SolidWorks is what I'm most comfortable in. That's what I'll build, like trays, mostly just trays, I think. But then I'll use ArduinoCAD for die lines, anything that's folded. I use Marvelous Designer when I do bags. Marvelous is like a fashion program. It's like does cloth, so like you can do stitching and sort of stuff in that. But I find it works really well for bags. And then recently I picked up Cinema 4D I've been using. And then Rhino, I just started learning.
Yeah, I've seen some of the stuff that you've done with fabrics. I saw some garment bags, a suit. So what are you using for all that fabric? Is that the Marvelous?
That's Marvelous, yeah. So I think Marvelous does a really good job, like to try to model like creases. SolidWorks is impossible pretty much. Where I think Marvelous does a pretty good job of it, and same with Cinema 4D. You can do creases pretty good. I did for Peloton, we did some shrink wrap stuff where I think shrink wrap is kind of hard to do just because of all those wrinkles and twists and everything. Where I did that in Cinema, and you were able to just kind of just draw the bag over it and then compress it down onto the product.
So if somebody's out there, right, if you're a packaging designer like me that has done the graphic side of it, you understand the structural side of it. I do zero 3D. If somebody wants to get started in 3D, like what would you recommend? Like some of that's like SolidWorks is like super heavy.
Yeah.
Like what would be the path?
I haven't used it, but I know a lot of people use Blender. You could try Blender just because Blender is free. So it's like a good foot in the water and see if you like it. Same with like Rhino. I think Rhino is relatively cheaper than SolidWorks, but I'm not sure on the price of it. Same with Cinema. I think depends really what you want to do. Like if you want to do just packaging, I'd probably do Rhino or SolidWorks. If you want to do everything like packaging or product design, maybe you go to Cinema because Cinema gives you can kind of just do everything. And it depends too, like are you building just concepts? Or then I go more towards Cinema. But if you're building for manufacturing, I'd probably go towards SolidWorks or Rhino where you can get like exact dimensions down, where Cinema is a lot harder to get exact shapes down. You're trying to make it look right. Yeah,
I just finished teaching a semester at ASU here on packaging. And I had the majority of the students were like, we've never done any 3D stuff. I'm like, all right, well, you guys can figure it out. They half of them went and did Adobe Dimensions. The renders that came out of there were great, but it was like you were finding existing shapes and then combining them to create whatever it was that your final shape was. So it wasn't like super customizable, but it did the job. So I think that was like a good option. And then the other half did Blender. And they're like, this was the first time that they were doing anything in there. I mean, the renders that came out of that were pretty amazing. I mean, I think what was cool was that they didn't have to build in one program and render in another. It's just like everything was all in one, which was kind of cool.
You can do that in Cinema. You can do that in Cinema also. There's like Redshift and there's I think Octane are built into Cinema, or there's like add-ons you can build all in one program. It's just you just gotta find kind of what you're comfortable with, and that's what I recommend people just find one program and try to get really good at one program and then move on. Before you some people try to do I'm gonna learn like these three, and you never get good at any of them.
If finding your spec data is a wild goose chase around your office, you've got a data problem. SpecRite is the only cloud-based management specification solution that every brand needs. Because if you don't spec right, you'll spec wrong.
That's cool, man. And then, so you were at Peloton. So what kind of packaging were you working on at Peloton?
Peloton, they brought me in as a visualization designer for the packaging team. So I was supposed to come in and I was supposed to kind of do just rendering and concept sketching for the packaging design team. But then they're just shorthanded. So I kind of jumped in on a lot of extra projects where I was doing concept development also. Most of my time was spent on actually rendering packaging. So we would have the concept and I would take that concept and render it so it looked complete. And we would present that to upper management to get buy-in on projects. Then we'd also use those renders to present to our vendors. So they would see exactly what we wanted for our packaging and understand the unboxing experience we needed.
So again, it's like in packaging, you can build a career in a million different directions, right? So at Peloton, you were doing concept development and the rendering. So you're doing the front end and the back end.
Yeah, pretty much.
And you can just specialize in something like that.
Yeah, it's different. When I was at Veritas, we kind of you went from the sketch all the way right through engineering. You would do everything there. For Peloton and Juul, they broke out the engineering and the design department. So I would just do design and then I'd hand it off to the engineering team. And the engineering teams are kind of worried more about the manufacturing process. So that was kind of nice to have that off your plate sometimes.
And then you've now moved on and you've picked up a gig with Enlisted. So how did How's that come about? Because you're on the East Coast, and what's this new gig?
Right now at Enlisted, I am a packaging designer for them. It's been good. I've only been there like a month, so I can't tell you like a ton of projects I've worked on or anything like, but so far it's been really good. I thought I was good at rendering, and I got there and I was like, these guys are really good. But like they're showing me things, I'm like watching something, oh, man, this is like really intense. So it was good. Everything, and I didn't know about them until Bo had reached out to me and I went to their website. I didn't know of them, but I knew of all their work. Once I went to their portfolio, I was like, oh, I see everything you guys have done. This is like all the stuff I usually like doing. So it was like a good fit of them being so focused on like rendering and concept development. And then that's exactly what I love doing.
That's right. I had Bo on the podcast a while ago. Yeah, I met him like maybe like 15, 18 years ago before he started Enlisted. He had started a company of these like magnetic little pots and stuff. You know, that was like crazy. And then he like launches this Enlisted, which is again an amazing agency. I mean, all the work. Once you go to their website, you're like, holy crap, these guys do everything. You know, from
that's what I thought. Like once he called me and I was like, oh, let me see what you guys got. I was like, oh, this is not exactly what I expected at all. Like this is like everything I love doing as you guys do. Yeah, so it was good. It was like I left Peloton and then he called me pretty much the next day. It's kind of nice. And then I got everything I like doing. So far it's been good.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. So then you're doing Enlisted. You've done almost 20 years in packaging. You've got engineering background. You know your materials, your finishes. You know, this is a great step in your career to be working with the team at Enlisted. If you're looking ahead, what are you seeing in terms of trends for packaging? And what are maybe some misses that a lot of brands aren't looking at when it comes to packaging?
I think the biggest trends are going to be like sustainability. Obviously, everybody is moving towards sustainable. And if you're not, you're going to just get left behind. The other trend is like, I think a lot more stuff, maybe less stores. There's going to be a lot more at-home shipping instead of going to a store and actually buying a product. So you have to worry a lot less about like your on-shelf presence. You have to worry more about like your unboxing process and how people dispose of your packaging. I don't want to throw anyone under the bus. I'm just trying to think of
like, you know, is there anything that you ever unbox and you're like, oh man, if they could have only done like these two things, this would have been so much better, or this could have been more sustainable, or, you know, like I got this not too long ago. I got this Ledger, you know, key card for crypto. And like, you know, you open it, it's really nice. You've got this like rigid board with a DBoss on the logo. And then you open it up and there's like this insert, which is just like this little sleeve, right? And it's not the cheapest piece of equipment. And I was like, oh man, this would be so nice if this was like molded and you had like a little finger hole you pull up and then you got all the components underneath it. I felt like that was a miss, right? But it seemed like a great starting point for launching a brand because it was inexpensive. But then come to find out, like they just redid all of their packaging and now it's like completely different and it's, you know, pretty amazing, like everything that you get with it. So I don't know. I always look at packaging and go like, oh man, this could be so much better if it was X or what, you know, whatever that is.
Yeah, but I always think about it too, is like I'm always thinking about that package designer who's like, he probably had awesome ideas and it probably is like, oh, here's your 2-week timeline, we need everything, or it's like, here's your 50-cent budget. So I don't know, I'm sure they had something great. It got rushed at the last second. Yeah, I remember doing like a lot of that, like even for like, I had so many brands where we had awesome packaging. I just don't want to say them. And then like the last second, they would switch them on you, change everything up on you. But it's a lot of times out of the packaging designer's hand. It's whoever has the budget, whoever makes the decision.
If you're a packaging designer out there and, you know, you're working freelance or you're just, you know, graduated from school and you're starting your path as a freelance packaging designer, what are your thoughts on fee structure? What's the best way to set yourself up?
Freelance, I didn't really have a ton of luck in freelance until the last couple of years. Like I remember when I got out of college, I was like, oh, it'd be great. I could freelance and do other work, but it's like nobody knew who I was. Nobody knew what you could do. And to be honest with you, I probably wasn't very good at that time. So it was just like, for a long time, I didn't work for people. I just worked for myself kind of. And I just like constantly create random concepts just to like build up a portfolio and build up your skill set. But now I kind of, depends on the client. Sometimes I'll switch it, whatever they're comfortable with. Sometimes some of the clients are more comfortable with like an hourly structure. So that way they know exactly what they're paying, or they kind of get exactly what they're paying for, where other clients are more comfortable with like, here's our budget. I'll work with inside that budget. It kind of just depends on the client. And then most of my clients are also friends. So like I try not to, depending on what it is, I try not to hurt them too bad with pricing and just try to stay competitive.
Yeah, no, that's cool, man. I think, you know, a lot of times when I'm talking to young designers or students graduating, they talk about freelancing, the numbers that they start throwing out are either ridiculously high or they're ridiculously low. You know,
I remember when I started, I was real low. I was like, just selling myself away. I was like, I was just better off just doing my own work. Like now I know like the only thing I do is probably different than some people is if I do Ardios, I just charge people for that license just because that license is expensive and I don't own it. So I have to rent it. So it's just like, if you guys want die lines, I just upcharge them the Ardios license.
Okay. And what's a license? You know, you're saying it's kind of expensive for a Ardios license. What's that cost?
$600 a month. But it's a great program. If you're going to do die lines, you can't beat it. Probably the best out there. But if I own my own company, it's worth it. But for me to do die lines at night and the weekends, I can't justify it. But there's other programs. If you're not building die lines, if you're building 3D structure, you can just get Arduous or Rhino or one of those other ones, you'll be all right.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's cool, man. But I think that's a great point. If you're a young designer out there and you're looking to start billing freelance, look at all your expenses. Make sure you're covering your expenses, right? You've got a license there that you got to cover. Make sure you're covering that. And then of course.
So, and then another thing I always kind of figured out is like sometimes I would take bare minimum is that like I take what I currently make in my regular job and then just do time and a half. Because you figure like bare minimum, that's you're working overtime. So you should get paid time and a half. That's usually, and then on top of that, kind of figure out what your licensing fee is that month or how much a painting license is for the month and figure out into your price.
That's a great way to build out your pricing. I never thought of that. I mean, if you're doing freelance and you got a full-time gig, time and a half because you are working overtime plus all of your other fees. I mean, that's a good place to start.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. It's like, especially if you don't like freelancing, like I love doing it, but like sometimes you just don't want to do it. So it's like, I'm not going to do it for a bare minimum.
Yeah.
You kind of have to. And it's also kind of be picky. If you have a chance, pick projects you love, because that way you'll build up a portfolio of projects you love and you'll get more clients you like. Where if you start doing projects you don't want to do, you're just going to get more projects you don't want to do.
Yeah, 100%. That's awesome, man. So as we kind of start wrapping up here, dude, as you know, having done all these different businesses that you've worked on, all the different products and different industries, what's the favorite industry that you've been in?
Consumer electronics. I've done toys, I've done vapes, I've done like cannabis industry. I just like consumer electronics. I think it's because I like those products too, so that helps. It's like, oh, here's a new gadget. So, and then they also have nice budgets usually for packaging, and they're also like front runners a lot of times in your unboxing experience. Like they're trying to like create the next big thing or the next great experience.
That's cool, man. That's awesome. Yeah. Consumer electronics are always a good time. I always just think of in the past, it was almost like the bigger the box, the better, where, you'd open something up and you'd have, a tablet in one section, and you'd have a pen or a mouse or, it's like, it was really about being wide and taking up a lot of space to validate the pricing. Versus now it's like, how compact can you get it? Which from a design standpoint, I love because now it's the challenge. Like they're throwing down the challenge of how small can you get this thing and still have a great experience? And you've got to like figure out new folds and like new materials. And that's the part that I love is the challenge. It's like, can you make this even smaller and still be awesome? Right.
Yeah. Like you do more with less.
Everybody's concerned about sustainability today. What if I told you can take your pouches, labels, your single serve wrappers and make them completely dissolve, make them completely disappear in water? That's what the team at SmartSolve has done. They've got a paper that is certified flushable. You can actually take the packaging, put it in the sink, put it in the shower, put it in the toilet, flush it. It dissolves completely into fiber. Learn more about SmartSolve. Go to smartsolve.com and ask for samples. Now let's get back to the show.
Yeah, I like that. And then also like, it's not necessarily something I work on, but like also the sneaker industry, the last couple of years I thought has really been awesome as far as like new material. So like I pull a lot of inspiration from like, what are they doing and how can we bring that into packaging, where you see like Adidas doing like the ocean plastic, Allbirds doing the wool and doing Enlisted did their packaging for them too. As like, how can we bring those materials into packaging and just try to innovate like that?
Where do you find inspiration?
Pinterest is pretty good. I use that a lot. Instagram is really good. I listen to your podcast, so then like that helps. Yeah, and then just like friends throughout the industry, and then just go into stores, you kind of see something on the shelf and like, what is this? Where like it catches your eye, or I think Instagram and Pinterest are pretty solid.
Are you looking at packaging though, or are you looking at other things?
A lot of times on Instagram, I'm looking at like, just because I like doing rendering a lot, I look at a lot of rendering and like how people are, a lot of product photography, because then I can like mimic that product photography for rendering, but like how do they set their shots, how's their lighting set up. And then I'll also look at like a lot of product design, like what are new trends outside of packaging, because that trend didn't come to packaging. Yeah. Like, I think Microsoft recently has done a really good job. They keep doing all these products for like people with disabilities.
Yeah.
Whereas like that's like they're not going to make money on that, but they're doing it because they know it's right. But then you see other companies like Nike made those shoes for people with disabilities that you don't need laces. So it's like, I feel like that's a trend where companies are trying to do more like projects that they're not necessarily going to make money on, but they're just better for the world. So like I think you're going to see more of that in packaging. Where like people will start donating parts of their packaging or doing something that packaging will help the environment, help the world.
I guess last question here is, when somebody asks you for sustainable packaging, like what does sustainability in packaging mean to you?
The one thing I always think about is like, if a product doesn't survive shipment, it's not sustainable. Like that's the worst thing that could possibly happen. So I'd much rather have the package wrapped in foam and the product survive, the product being complete or package being completely sustainable, but the product doesn't survive, because then you're just wasting. That product's wasted, that package is wasted, all that transit's wasted. So that's like the worst possible thing I kind of think of is like, you have to make your product survive and look good on shelves. People will actually buy it, not just sit there and get wasted. And then from there, like if you can do like a single material throughout your packaging, I try to do that a lot of times, where I'll have nothing but paper in my packaging, so that way you can just throw it out together and you don't have to worry about. Because I don't think a lot of people separate their packaging. Or if stuff's glued together, it's less likely they're going to take it apart.
Yeah, for sure, man. Well, hey, dude, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us on Tuesday morning here. Yeah, dude, this is rad. Glad, we finally got to meet face to face here on Zoom. Stoked for your new gig with Enlisted. Those guys do amazing work. So pretty stoked to see what the cool project you get to work on there.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for trying to listen to your LinkedIn podcast you guys do. Mondays you guys do it, or Tuesdays?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do a newscast on Mondays where we kind of just cover some of the stuff that's happening in packaging. Wednesdays we do a LinkedIn audio where everybody kind of just hops in. It's a lot of sustainability, either designers or manufacturers. It's a good way to just build this network of packaging people. And then Fridays I do a LinkedIn class.
That's cool. Yeah, I do that one too. Yeah, they're good. It's just like I know it's hard to get enough packaging information sometimes, or it's good if somebody else can kind of curate it for you once in a while.
No, for sure, that's the goal. And I think for us, it's like building a packaging community, because there's not a lot of us out there. It seems like there's a ton, but there's really not. I don't know. It feels like in the past, like 20 years ago, if you were a packaging designer, it was really competitive. I got to crush this brand. I got to crush this other team. And then as you start working longer in the industry, you're like, oh, hey, now I'm working with the people that I was competitive with in the past. And it's like, no, it's like all about just building this network. And now I can, like for me, I can reach out to somebody that may be a competitor and ask them questions, and they're going to come back and answer. And hey, these are the materials that I recommend, or it's like super open, which I think it just makes the whole entire industry so much better. Yeah,
packaging is an incredibly small industry for how many packages there are. I feel like everybody goes like, oh, I know someone at that company, or somebody, a friend of a friend at that company.
100%, man. That's awesome, dude. So Matt, I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, if anybody wants to get a hold of you, you good with them reaching out to you on LinkedIn?
Yeah, that's fine.
Cool. I'll have your information in the show notes.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate it.